All right. Hello. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Maya Korbik, and I'm the founder of Denari Financial Education Academy, whose mission is to provide fun, educational, and interactive tools for parents and caregivers to help them teach children financial literacy. My guest today is Sammie Joseph-Fredericks, who is the author of two children's books, Spending at the Fair and Grandma's Special Gift. Thank you for joining us, Sammie. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you end up in the financial literacy field?
Yes, sure. So I am originally from Liberia, West Africa. And I remember growing up in Liberia, there were not a lot of conversations around money. The only thing we really heard about money was we didn't have any, right? So we want something, my mom or dad will always say, oh, we don't have money for that. Um, that was the extent of the conversation about money in our family, and not just our family, but a lot of other homes that I remember going to, right? And so fast forward, we moved to the United States in 1997, and I started college, shortly after that. And I remember coming to out of a class one day, and there were a lot of creditors lined the streets where they were giving students credit cards. And of course, I signed up for one because back home, credit was not something that was common, right? If you wanted something, you had to pay cash for it. And so got a credit card and of course maxed out that credit card, and being a student and not working, wasn't able to pay it back. And that was just like the beginning of my troubles with money. Fast forward, I had a lot of issues managing money, paying bills on time, and suffered dearly because of the decisions that I made. And it was simply because I just was not taught anything about money. I was able to get myself out of that situation through a series, talking to people. I was able to, do a lot of research, learn a lot of things on my own. And I had my son 6 years ago. I looked at him and I was like, I didn't want him to go through some of the things that I had gone through financially. And so I started teaching him. And that was where we started telling stories, and the stories turned into books. And that's how the books got started.
That's amazing. Yeah. And so it sounds like you had certain hardships that, shaped you who you are today. And like as many parents tell me, the reason why they commit on this journey of teaching kids financial literacy is because they don't want their own children to go through the experiences that they had.
Right.
And the credit card story that you had is very similar to, I've had so many people tell me exactly the same thing. And I do know also that I got my first credit card when I studied at University of Toronto, and it was the same kind of thing. They had a booth set up, and I ended up getting my first credit card for $500 in exchange for a CD. And they were giving out free CDs, here, come get your credit card. Here's a free CD with it. And I really wanted that CD. So that's why I got the credit card. Luckily for me, and I honestly, I can't take the credit for it. I mean, I did work, but I didn't max out that credit card. I was actually responsible with it, but I can't say it was because I had any financial knowledge. I just feel like there was some luck involved with that. So I really lucked out. And it could have been also because I was studying business at the time. So maybe some things were in my head. But yeah, definitely your story resonates, I think, with a lot of parents, with a lot of people.
Right. I guess, I think it just goes back to I had never heard of a credit card before, had never used one before, right? So
Right.
where we were coming from in Liberia, nobody issued anybody a credit card. So this was like a first time for me, right?
Yeah, and you know what? I think a lot of immigrants can understand what you're saying because
Right.
same as you, I'm an immigrant too. My family came to Canada in 1994, and same thing. Like back in Bosnia, which used to be part of former Yugoslavia, nobody had credit cards, and my mom only got her first credit card 4, maybe 5 years ago, and I literally had to twist her arm to get it because she was determined. Like she doesn't, other than the mortgage that she had and she paid up in 8 years, aggressively. She just didn't believe in credit. Like, it was kind of like, we just, whatever money we have, this is what we spend. So I think your story is definitely something that happens a lot with immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And do your parents in US right now?
My mom is, yes. So she's here, and the thing is, when we were back home, she traveled here a lot. So yeah, she's here now, um, and she lives close to where we are. So yeah, has her own house and all of that stuff.
Does she have
So
her own credit card?
definitely managing credits now. Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. So what prompted you to write the children's books? I mean, you obviously, this propelled you on the journey in the financial literacy, um, area, but why books?
So we read a lot of books at home with my son, right? So we taught him to read at an early age. We do a lot of storytelling, and I was sitting one day with my son telling him a story about the story about the kids in the book, which was where it started. And my husband was listening to us, and he was like, "Why don't you do a book?" I'm like, you know, why do a book, right? He's like, I think people will love to hear that story or to read this story with their kids. So I went ahead and did a book, not thinking that it was, I know it's so weird, but I did this book, not even thinking. I wrote the manuscript, not even thinking it was going to actually go anywhere. And I shared it with a few people, and people were like, you need to turn this into a real book. And that's how it started.
That's amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think stories are a perfect way to share lessons
Yeah,
with other people, but mainly children.
right.
Yeah, and I find that with me and my husband, we really try to talk to our kids. We're very big on talking to our kids and sharing real life moments. So depending, it doesn't matter what's happening in our lives. Like sometimes around when we're sitting around dinner table, I'll mention that, for example, I was negotiating, like with my insurance company, and a lot of times, like, kids don't even know what insurance is, right? So we have conversations about it, or I will tell them a story. Just recently, actually, I ended up buying or sending flowers to a very dear friend of mine, and I made a mistake of just kind of rushing and not properly reading the fine print. So I ended up getting charged twice as much on my credit card than what I thought I was going to pay. And this was like one of those classical mistakes. And I can't believe it happened to me, out of all people. Like, I've been teaching financial literacy for so long, right? Like, it's kind of embarrassing. But it was a perfect moment to tell my kids that this happens to everybody. And what can they, as well as I, learn from this, right? So I think that stories are wonderful.
Yeah, be
Sorry, what's that?
careful. No, I said the lesson there is, read the fine print always.
Right, right. Yeah. So speaking of the lessons, do you want to tell us, just sort of summarize, maybe show us your books and just summarize what is the lesson in each one of them?
Sure. So the Luke and Dee Dee Money Adventure series is a 5-book series that teach young children lessons on saving, spending, sharing, investing, and giving, and earning money. And so the first book in the series came out about 2 years ago, and is Grandma's Special Gift. And this one literally started the series of books, and it's mainly about saving. So these two friends, they always hang out together. And Luke, it was his birthday, and his grandma sent him money for the first time instead of toys. And he was like, why, why would you do that? And this is where the whole learning about money starts. Their journey on financial literacy starts with this book, right? And so you see on the cover, they create jars to split up his money in these 3 different buckets, right? Save, spend, and share. And so this is where it started. The series starts with them. And then the second book is Spending at the Fair. And so it's Luke and Dee Dee again, and they are this one is about a day at the fair, and they're literally just they had money out of the jars, and now they're taking some of their spend money to enjoy their day at the fair. But of course, in the beginning, they had a list of things that they wanted to do, and they derailed, right? Because they saw other things, and now they're only left with so much money and have to decide on, what kind of food to get, right? And so, and in this second book, I start in the back of the book. This one is about spending, of course, and then I start adding pieces in the back where parents can talk to their kids about what they read and some of their own real life spending that they do.
Wonderful. And I, before this interview, we connected, and I was saying that I actually bought that book for my children, and I have older children. I have a teenager and a tween, and I still love reading to them, even though those are picture books. I think there's a lot of valuable information and lots of great lessons. So Spending at the Fair was one of those books where actually, I think I was mentioned before, like this is something we experienced in real life a few years ago when my kids had a limited amount of money to spend at the fair. And when things didn't really go that well, same as Dee Dee and Luke, they came to us and they tried to get us to rescue them and give them more money. And we just, stood our ground and said, no, you have to figure it out on your own. And that's what Luke and Dee Dee do in this book. And it's really a great book because I think it teaches, everybody can learn from it. There are adults that struggle with finances. And really, to me, one of the main lessons of that book was, we all want so many things, and it's okay to want things, right? Like we can put them on the list, but we can't have it all at the same time or not right away. We have to sort of prioritize and then work our way down that list and figure out, okay, what can we get now and what can we, maybe save up money for later, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And I really enjoy that you, the back part of the book too, which is really good for discussion and helps open up that dialogue between the parents and the children.
Right. And that was the point. And it wasn't included in the first book, but going forward, I will always have that section in the back where, parents can use it to gauge what the kids read in the book and their understanding of that topic.
Right. And you said to me that sometimes you read that book with your son several times, like you read it and then you come back to it. And tell us why you do that.
Well, like I said to you in our earlier conversation, the goal of writing these books was not to entertain children. I seriously wanted to teach children, use this as a tool to teach children about money. So it's not it's not a book these are not books that you will, buy for your kids and read it to them one time and be done. I want parents to use this as a tool to start the conversation. So what are your thoughts about why they didn't have enough money to buy everything that they want? What do you think they could have done differently? Do you think their parents should have given them money after they had spent their money, without even and derailing from their plan? So those are conversations we always go back, and with young kids, you don't want to overwhelm them at one time. So read the book the first time, talk about one question, and then come back and discuss something else. And if they don't remember, go back and read the book again. But we have read these books all the time. The time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's important. Like I know even in the financial literacy workshops and webinars that my company does with especially young kids, but even with some older ones, as you said, like the goal is not to overwhelm them. You cannot overwhelm them and expect them to remember everything. And sometimes even when we think like, oh, they got this concept, and let's say we go back, some of that may not necessarily have really sunk in. So you need to repeat that. And that's why I feel like financial literacy should be one of those things that it's continuous. You can't just do it one time and think we're done with it. I always tell parents, it's kind of like teaching our kids manners or hygiene, right? Like we start off, telling them, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. And finally, like, I see my kids, like I have a teen and a tween, and okay, yes, great. They go, like now they'll come into the house, they'll wash their hands. But then now we're teaching them personal hygiene, like taking regular
Mhm.
showers and like, washing their face because, they're getting oily in their teens and, all that. But I'm just using that as a metaphor, or not as a metaphor, just to compare the two, because the
Right.
job is not done. And we, as parents, yeah, this is personal hygiene, but this is financial literacy. It's just something we have to keep reinforcing. And hopefully by the time they're 18, they will understand what needs to be done and they'll be able to do it on their own.
And I like the point that you're making, right? Because it's continuous. Is we have to continue to enforce those lessons, right? So it's not just the reading the books, it's not just the conversations, right? But then it's also about giving them opportunities to earn money or to have money, and practice real life, right? Let them have money and let them go and experience what it feels like to not have enough to cover everything that you want. So we can
Right.
read all of the books, but if they're not like hands-on practicing some of these examples or lessons, there's still going to be a gap there, I think. So
Yeah.
even though my son is 6 years old, when we're going to the store, Maya, he takes his wallet. And if we go in, he doesn't have his wallet, he's just not going to get anything. We're not going to, because he earns money, right? So now he knows that when he doesn't have his wallet, he's just not even going to try to even ask for anything. So
Exactly.
it works. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and you say he earns money. Do you want to share with us how he earns money and what he does?
Yeah, so we call him our compost manager here in our family. About 2 years ago, I posted a job here in our house where we needed someone to manage the compost. So after we eat, to scrape out all of the scraps into like a compost bucket, and then take it out to the trash, and then take it out to to our city dump where they process the compost. So and this was 2 years ago, right? So now he's almost 7, but he interviewed. I prepared him for that. He interviewed. He signed a contract, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that when I posted it, he signed a contract and said that this is what I'll do 3 times a week, and this is how much I will get paid. And if I don't do it, I don't get paid. So this is how he gets paid. And sometimes we pay him to read books too.
Oh, yeah, well, and it's interesting. I mean, I love his title, first of all. He has a fancy title. That's really cute.
Yeah,
But you know what? I always believe that children treat their money differently from our money.
that is true.
Yes. And
That
so
is
I
true.
think that, kids, I think it's important that kids have their own money and learn from it when the stakes are very low and dollar values are very
Yeah.
low. So even if they make some mistakes, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. It's better they make them now than when they have, let's say, a 6-figure job after they graduate from university or something like that, right?
Yeah, you talk about kids will, treat their money differently than they do ours. That is so true because my son, when he wanted this electric scooter that he had been saving up for, right? And when he had enough money to get this scooter, he was online and he was asking me to spell cheap. Mom, how do you spell cheap and how do you spell scooter, right? So he wants with his own money to buy cheap stuff. He doesn't want to spend all his money on this one item. But when it comes, if it's us that are, that have to spend, then he doesn't care about the price at that point.
Of
So you're
course.
so right. Yeah.
Yeah. And and going back to your book about spending money at the fair, I didn't tell you what actually, I'm not going to tell you the whole, it's actually quite a long story, but I'll just tell you one snippet of what happened with my kids a few years ago when we went to the fair. It was the same kind of thing. They brought their money. And prior to that, we get a lot of fairs because we're kind of close to the lake here, Lake Ontario, and throughout the summer there's a lot going on. So I always encourage my kids to bring their little wallets and then spend their own money. So they brought some of their money. And in the past, my husband and I would buy them those bracelets for different rides that they have at the fair. And it would be like a bracelet, like unlimited number of rides. But then as they got older, I started noticing they weren't really going on as many rides. They just sort of took that bracelet for granted. So that particular year, I changed the rules. I said, listen, you are not getting the bracelet. You're going to pay for the rides yourself. It was a completely different ball game. So they went from ride to ride to ride to figure out which one was worth of their money or which one was cool that they want to ride. And then finally they settled on this one ride, but it was, I think, $3 per person. But they didn't know for how long it was. All of a sudden it started mattering, how long is this ride if we're going to spend $3 each on it? So they asked the operator and he told them, I think it was 2 minutes. They lost it at this guy. Like, they were yelling at him. They're like, you want $3 for 2 minutes? Are you crazy? And I'm standing there and I'm like, I don't know if I should be embarrassed or if I should be proud. But completely different than, them, getting that unlimited bracelet because they just didn't appreciate it.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. No, that's a proud mama moment right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to tell us about the 3 other books? When can people expect them to come out? And what are you planning on covering? Just like a short snippet in each of them.
Right. So the third book, and I'm just going to release them in phases. So the next book that's coming out will be about earning money, and then after that we have giving, and investing. Investing was one actually that I added after I met JJ Winrick and his wife on Instagram. So, the author that you interviewed a while ago about who wrote the Teaching Kids to Buy Stock book. So I have a copy of that book, and this is what prompted me to add the investing piece to the series. So I'll be this summer we'll be releasing the third book, and once all of the books have been released, I will then do like a bundle deal where people can buy all 5 books together in a package if they want.
That's perfect. And do you want to tell them where they can find these books if they would like to purchase them now, the first 2 at least?
Yep. So the first 2 are available now for purchase, and they're available everywhere books are sold online. So the big Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble. And it's also available through my website, which is www.sammiefredericks.com.
Okay, wonderful. And so it's actually interesting because I feel like with the 5 books, those are the sort of like the 5 main pillars of financial literacy, and you're covering all of them. And usually when I tell people that donating or giving is part of financial literacy, people look at me shocked. And I'm glad to hear that donating is part of your 5-book series. Do you want to tell me why you think donating is an important part of financial literacy? Why do we need to teach our kids about donating?
Because at least for us, we don't want it to just be a me, me, me. We teach our son that he is blessed to have some of the things that he has now, because coming from Liberia, a third world country, some of the things my son has now, we did not even dream about having. Okay. And so he's blessed, and we want him to understand that he has enough, and he has more than enough to be able to share, because there are other people that are unfortunate and not so lucky like him, right? And so this is a huge part of every lessons that we teach at home. Giving is important. We practice it. We give to organizations that one organization that provide books to children in Liberia. We give to St. Jude Hospital here. And we don't just give, he is a part of that. He helps choose some of the organizations that we give to. And we talk about why these kids are in need, and how our money will go to, or whatever we give, time or money will go to help kids or the organization that we donate to.
That's really great. And I like that you're mentioning it's not just the money, sometimes it's the time, if you're given time. And I'm assuming you've taught him that already, that you guys are giving some of your time. That's great. Yeah. What about some other things that you're planning on teaching your son in the future? I mean, he's only 7, right? So what are the big plans for the future in terms of his financial literacy education?
Well, so it's good you asked that because we talked about this, and I seriously believe that financial literacy is more than teaching just about money. And so some of the things, the 5 lessons that I talk about in the book are things that we hound, right? We teach every single day, every opportunity we get, we talk about it. But we also believe that emotional, you know, being able to manage emotions, plays a huge part in financial literacy, right? We know as adults that when we're sad and we're depressed and we're stressed out, we tend to do things that things like overeat or overspend, right? So it is important to also incorporate emotional intelligence into the mix as we teach financial literacy. Why do I feel like this? What are some of the ways that I can relieve stress or get rid of this feeling of depression, right? Through we practice meditation, we talk about breathing, we talk about taking a step back sometimes and thinking about some of the actions that you want to take, right? So that is a huge part of what we teach my son at home, to manage his emotions. You're not always going to have money. You're not always going to get the things that you want. How do you manage yourself in those situations?
Correct. Yeah. And it's really interesting because when I studied, when I did my BCom at University of Toronto, I didn't see that at that time. I mean, I'm dating myself, it was a long time ago, but I didn't see them having behavioral economics course.
Mhm,
And as
mhm.
you said, over the years, in my career as an auditor and tax person and CFO, like I've witnessed that sometimes, just plain economics doesn't make sense.
Right.
um, most people know what they should be doing with their money, or that they maybe shouldn't be overspending, yet some of them still overspend it. So that behavioral economics is so important. And I wish I hope to study it one day, actually. I really do, because I think it's, as you said, it's very important to teach our children to manage their emotions, and maybe not go to the shopping mall if they're feeling depressed or sad and looking for a way to cheer themselves up. Perhaps there is a different way of handling those emotions, and they should not be connected to money.
Right. Right.
Right? Yeah. So I really like that a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
there are just so many ways that you can go with financial literacy. We talked about that, so many ways. Um, we have cars. We tell our son how we have those cars. That nothing's free. The running water, the lights that we turn on, we have to pay for all of these things. And it's so surprising how shocked he is. Like, really, we pay for this? To who? Like, why? We just moved, and the whole process of getting a new home, he was involved. He was involved in from the first meeting with realtors to going around to find homes and looking at homes that we could not afford, and just having him involved in every step of the process, right? These are homes that we can afford. He sees us working from home. He sees us doing all of these extra things from home. This is how we pay the bills. Nothing really comes free, right? And so we it's just a continual process of having that conversation, educating him, not to be overwhelming. It's not like this is all we do and this is all we talk about, but we let him know. We let him know. We want him to learn these things from us because, like a lot of schools, his school does not teach financial literacy, right? And so this is where he's going to get that education.
Right. And it's really interesting. You're like, this is not all we do. That's what I periodically like to post on my social media accounts, because my social media accounts are saturated with the financial literacy things that I teach my kids. So I always say, I'm like, please, people out there who are reading this, please know that I do teach my kids all these other things. This is not, I don't just teach them about money, money, money. But I do believe in what you and your husband are doing. I think it's so important to include our kids in everyday life. And sometimes it's not very convenient to, like like, especially if some people have 3 or 4, I don't know, 5 children, to lug everybody around and maybe go see a realtor and, go see houses. But I think it is important to do that because that's how they learn, that's how they see. And maybe not everything is going to stick with them, but some things will stick. They will learn that, as you said, like, there are some things that we can afford and some things that we cannot, and perhaps the things that we cannot afford, maybe we can work and save up for them, right? And I think, like, as I said, like, with my family, we really try to, like, if we're sitting around the table having lunch or dinner, I'd like to bring up something, maybe even something that I've seen in the news. Like, lately, the biggest talk in our house has been the initial public offering of Roblox stock. So I'm using this opportunity to talk to my kids about stocks and about stock market. But every time something happens, I always try to just bring it up. And as you said, we're not trying to push it down their throats. It's just more like a light conversation. And if they ask questions, we answer them, but I don't push too far. If the conversation changes direction, then we just go in that other direction. Yeah. So, besides, learning, so from your parents, I know you said you didn't really learn that much from your parents, but what is there, like, one lesson that you did learn from your parents when you were in Liberia?
Right. So, and I say this because, and it's so funny that I feel like I've become my mom, but my mom was so resourceful, right? I knew that we didn't have a lot of money, but she worked, my dad worked, and we went to, like, were able to attend some of the best schools, right? My mom was very resourceful. She had a 9 to 5 and she had all these other, now we call it side gigs, right? So she was always doing stuff. She worked hard. So my work ethics, I definitely get from my mom. Definitely. And family was so important. We were first. We were very, very close, and there was so much love, even though we didn't have a lot of money.
And I think that's so important too. And when I talk about financial literacy in a lot of my webinars, that's one thing that I end with, because there is a story of my son. When he was very, very little, I actually didn't realize that when I first started my company, I was talking about money all the time, that my son got this idea that money was the most important thing in life. And it just shocked me. I was like, okay, this is not, the idea, or this is not what I want him to think, right? So the big thing is, like, I keep repeating it over and over and over again, the family, the love, that's what truly, truly matters. And recently I was actually reading a biography of Mary Kay Ash, who was one of the biggest US entrepreneurs, and her company was selling cosmetics. But one of her big things was, because for a long time she was a single mom and she had 3 kids, but one of the biggest thing was, for her, it was just family first and then career and money. And that's sort of what I'm trying to teach my children. I think that's very important.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah, and I think for your mom, I mean, she was definitely ahead of her time doing all these side gigs. That's pretty impressive. Right.
She was, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I look back at my parents, and I mean, I've learned a few things from my parents as well. Definitely nothing about credit cards or investing, but I know I've learned from my mom the art of stretching the dollar. I always say, I'm like, give me the money and I know I can stretch it. But, like, I know I can just, sometimes it's funny, like, my husband will open the fridge or pantry and it's like, there's nothing to eat here. And I'm like, I have a million ideas. Like, we can live off this for like a month. And he's like, what are you talking about? Or, gifting or something like that. Like, I can definitely stretch a dollar. And I think I got that from my mom, because same as your mom, like, she was very resourceful. And she was like that before us coming to Canada. But I think also coming here as an immigrant, I think she grew even more resourceful.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So yeah, is there anything else that you want, my viewers and followers to know about you? Anything else you would like to share with them before we end this interview?
Well, I mean, I just want to leave parents out there with this word. Financial literacy is so important. It is so important. We have, uh, you know, gone through life, or we're going through life, and you know that almost everything is related to money and finances and how we manage that stuff. We have to teach our children. We can't leave it up to the schools. Even if schools are offering financial literacy classes, it is still incumbent upon us as parents to teach our children. We are their first teachers. They're watching us, they're learning from us. It is important that we get intentional about setting them up for success in every area. So it's not just like academics and all of that stuff, but also financially, set them up. It is never too early to start. And even if you look at me now and say, well, your kid is 6 years old or 7 years old, and you still have all this time, you started early, it is never too late. It is never too late. If you have a teenager, sit down today. If you haven't had that conversation, and start that conversation today.
Right.
Doing that, it is so important.
Yeah, and I think it's very true. It's never too early and it's never too late. I always say, kids are smart enough to operate our
Yeah.
cell phones and iPads. They could certainly learn basics of financial literacy. And as you said, like start them off small. And for the teenagers, it's never too late. I do have some parents that sometimes tell me that, they think their kids are too young and that this stuff is talking about money is a topic for grown-ups. It's something we shouldn't burden our kids with. I don't think of it as burdening kids. I think we're just educating them. I don't know how you view it.
No, yeah, no, it's educating them. Like we send them to school every day to learn math and science and all of that stuff. This is just learning about money.
Right.
This is learning about how to manage your finances so that you're okay in the future. That to me is not a burden. I would say let it be age appropriate lessons. Don't burden young children with lessons that it's going to probably just fly over their heads, that they're not going to understand. Ensure that they're age appropriate, that it's fun. Make it fun.
Right.
And yeah, and I feel like that's where your success will come. Do not make it like, oh, you have to sit here and read this financial book or anything like that. I follow this one guy, I forgot what his name is, but I saw a video where he pays his teenager to read money books. This kid wants to make money, and his dad wants him to read these books. It's a win-win, right? So he's learning all of these things, and now he's almost like, oh, I need money to invest in this or to do that. And so, okay, read another book, and then you get money for that. So and I may be sitting here and and you listen to Maya or whatever, but you have to look at your own family and your own family dynamics and start teaching or creating lessons or whatever around your current situation. You can't do things exactly the way that I do it or the way Maya does it, right? So you have to look at your own family and based on your own family dynamics, start teaching your kids about money.
I agree with you. And I always say, we don't all parent the same way. We all parent differently. And sometimes we change our parenting style depending on, I have two children and I don't parent them the same way. My approach with my son is a little bit different from my daughter because they have different personalities. And so sometimes I talk to him very different than how I talk to my daughter. I'd love to talk to them, both in the same way, but if I want them to do something, there's a certain way how I ask if I want them to get things done, right? So I think it's the same thing as you said with teaching kids financial literacy. Everybody should figure out their own
What
style.
works for them.
There's no one fit all approach. Yeah. And so just before we end, do you mind telling us again where people can find you, your social media, as well as your website and email and anything else you want to give them so they can get in touch with you?
Yes, so I am on social media on Instagram at the Money Teaching Mom, and it's the same on Facebook at the Money Teaching Mom, or Sam the Money Teaching Mom. Um, and my website is www.sammiefredericks.com. And yeah, and my email, if anybody wants to reach out to me, you have questions, it's info at sammiefredericks.com.
That's great. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed your book. I highly recommend it to everyone out there, and I look forward to reading the other three when they come out. And I also look forward to, following you in social media and seeing what's next in store for you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the great work that you are doing to bring awareness to, financial literacy. So it's amazing. It's amazing. All the best on your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Okay. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.